Hi there, my name is Rees. I'm the executive chef of Key to the Kitchen Catering Company. I'm really excited to be here with you today. Thank you for joining me. We've got a really fun cooking class and a really fun dish that we're going to go over today. A big thank you to Golden Care. They do an amazing job, and their motto is that you can live a happy, healthy lifestyle from the comfort of your own home. And that's what we're going to try and provide for you here today. It's just providing a really healthy meal that's really fun to make and can provide an inexpensive meal directly from your own home. What we're going to cook today is a Alaskan king salmon. We're going to pair that with roasted parsnips and sautéed spinach as well. It's a family favorite in my house. We cook it probably once a month at least. It's really, really tasty. It's healthy as well. We're going to try and stay low on the sodium today. So this would be a low sodium, low fat dish today. And also with the salmon is really beneficial for you in a lot of different ways. It's high in vitamins, but it's also great for omega-3 fatty acids. Something just really help with the cardiovascular health, brain health, eye health. It helps with pretty much everything in your body. And the salmon is the most natural form of that. Okay, so let's get started on this dish. Again, we're gonna be cooking an Alaskan king salmon with roasted parsnips and sautéed spinach. Really, really fun. We're gonna start off directly with these parsnip roots. You can find these at pretty much any major grocery store. Will have these all year long. We'll start off just by treating these just like a carrot would be. We've got a handy peeler here, and a little trick of the trade that I like to do to keep my cutting board clean is I've got a little piece of parchment paper here, and I'm just gonna slide that parchment paper right over the cutting board, and I'll peel these right on top. That way when I'm done, I'm still left with no mess. I'm able to just crumble this up and toss it, and we're good to go. So I'll go ahead and start peeling these parsnips just like I would any major carrot. And it doesn't have to be perfect. If you leave a little bit of skin on there, it's not the end of the world. It still tastes great. It's just a little bit of a different color. When we roast it, it gets darker. And your parsnips may look slightly thicker or skinnier depending on the season and where you got them from as well. But they're all gonna taste the same, and they're all gonna roast the same, especially the way that we cut it. We're gonna cut these in what's called an oblong shape. It makes it so that no matter the thickness of the parsnip, it's gonna be the same thickness of cut from the skinny side to the thick side. That way they cook evenly while they're roasting in the oven. I love the taste of parsnip. They kind of remind me a little bit of an artichoke heart. They've got a little bit of that rooty sweetness to them. It's kind of like as if an artichoke and a carrot had a baby. This is pretty much what you would end up with. They're really delicious. They smell and taste great. And they pair really nicely with things like salmon and spinach for sure. There we go. So now that I've got those peeled, I'll just go ahead and take my peels just like I said, fold this up, and we've got a nice clean cutting board to work with after that. Okay, so with these parsnips, we're gonna go ahead and cut these in an oblong shape. Now I like to get rid of that tip here and the end there, just because they have the first parts in the dirt and it's hard to get those properly clean. So I'll go ahead and slice those off right from the start. There we go, and then we'll ditch those. And from there we can go straight into our oblong cuts. Now how we're gonna do this is, we'll start with the skinny side. I'm gonna turn it at a slight angle just like this. I'll take my chef knife and I wanna go at an oblong angle just like this. And I will slice it straight through. And then from there, I'm gonna turn my parsnip 90 degrees just like this and do the exact same cut. And every time I cut, I'll turn my parsnip 90 degrees and do the same cut at the same angle. And what you end up with all the way down the road are these oblong, kind of oddly shaped parsnips, but they're gonna stay the same thickness and width throughout the entirety of the parsnip, and you'll see what I mean in just a second here. So I'll go ahead and chop these up to a nice shape. All right, so now that we've got these parsnips all nice and cut, and they're all in an even shape so that they roast evenly, I'll go ahead and collect these all, and this will be the first thing that we toss in the oven today. These will take about 20 to 30 minutes to roast off and caramelize properly. When they're done, they'll be a nice golden brown and they'll be soft enough to chew through very easily. I've got just a regular mixing bowl here that I'll toss these into. And I'm gonna follow that with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. Not much, I just want enough to lightly coat the parsnips, so I'd say that's even half a teaspoon or so. I'm gonna finish that with some freshly ground black pepper. If you've just got the pre-ground stuff, no big deal. Just go ahead and give it a nice light coating. just enough to give each parsnip a little bit of flavor. And then I'm gonna top that off with just a pinch of regular kosher salt. I'm not gonna use a lot, again, maybe half a teaspoon of salt, and I'll toss these to coat them evenly. There we go. So now that I see that they've got a really nice glossy sheen on them from the extra virgin olive oil, each one of those parsnips has a little bit of black pepper and kosher salt coating them, and it's going to be really, really delicious. As the natural sugars in these parsnips start to caramelize and break down in the oven, it just becomes this perfectly salty, sweet kind of treat, and it's a vegetable that goes really well with the rest of our dish. So at this point, I've got just a regular little roasting pan here. Toss these right on top. I'll pat them down so that they're nice and even. I want to try and keep them all into a tight little bundle. I don't want them spread across too much, because that way the ones on the outside will start to get a little more golden brown than the ones in the middle. So this way they all kind of steam off of each other and they're able to roast evenly. I've got my oven preheated at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, I'm going to toss these in for about 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll keep checking on them as we continue to cook the rest of our meal. Go ahead and toss these in the oven. And we'll see those little guys in a few minutes. From here, let's go ahead and talk about our salmon. Now, this is a beautiful cut of salmon. I got this from my local grocery store, and this is traditionally the kind of shape that you'll see it in at the store. In this case, I have it skin on. Now, I wanted the skin on, but if you don't want the skin, your local fishmonger or butcher will be happy to take that off for you. And what we see is on the anatomy of this fish, this has already been deboned. So it starts off, there's a lot of little pin bones off in this little region, which is kind of where you see this gaps in here where they've removed those pin bones. If yours has not been deboned yet, no worries. It's really easy just to take your finger, run it the opposite direction along that salmon, and all of those pin bones will start to stick up. And you can use just a regular pair of tweezers to pull those right out. And they usually pull out fairly easily. It's better to do that before we cook the salmon, because once it's cooked, those pin bones will be really hard to see, and they'll provide kind of an unpleasant crunch on there as well. Nobody likes the bones. Another thing that you'll notice with this fish is that when I press down on it, it immediately kind of sponges back on me. It's got a little bit of tension, and that's a sign with all fish of freshness. If you press it in and it stays caved in like that, it means that the fish is probably a few days old. This is nice and fresh. It was just caught a few days ago, and you'll see a couple of different segments as we go along here. This portion right here, for instance, is the belly. You'll notice a really nice marbleization of fat. It's really, really healthy and tasty fat. However, it's not gonna cook at the same rate as the rest of the fish. So what I'd like to do is I'll separate that belly from the main loin of the salmon, just like this. And then we'll start to go ahead and break down this salmon. Now, before I dirty up my cutting board with that, I'm gonna set this aside, and I'm gonna teach you how to properly dice this onion so that we can use it with sauteing our spinach. So, in order to chop this onion, I've got a really sharp chef knife. It's important that this is a sharp knife, not a dull knife, because if we have a dull knife and we're cutting this onion, it's gonna bruise the onion cell walls, and you'll get a lot of the fumes that come up that make you cry while you're cutting it, and then it's embarrassing for me, it's embarrassing for everyone. So across our fingers, I've got a sharp knife here, and I'm gonna teach you how to cut this onion properly without breaking down those cell walls and the essential oils too greatly. So I'll take my chef knife, place my onion square in the center of my cutting board. I'll make sure it's not too slippery, that it's not sliding around my board here. And I'll take it and I'll go about a 1/4 inch up off of this onion, and I'll slice in, but I'm not gonna slice in all the way. I'm gonna stop about right there before the end of this onion, because I want to preserve that root to help me hold that onion into one piece there. Then from there, I'm gonna go up another 1/4 inch, go in almost to the end. Once again, I will leave a little bit of like a 1/4 inch at the end there so that the root of this onion helps to hold it all together. I'll do that 2 more times. 1, 2, and there we go. And we've got about 5 cuts horizontally along this onion. From there, I'll turn the onion and I can see the lines, the natural lines in the onion. And I want to kind of try my best to cut along those lines. It doesn't have to be exact, you don't have to line it up, but just cutting it in the same general direction and motion of those will help to prevent us from bruising the onion too greatly. So I'll hold my knife, and the way that I hold my knife is just like a pencil here. I'm going to take my pointer finger and my thumb, and I'm just going to kind of grip the knife. This provides stabilization from it flexing too much in these directions. I'm able to keep a nice steady movement. Now most chef knives have a curved angle, and that's so that you can slice in this direction while we're doing it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll start on this side of the onion and I'll work my way around this way, and I'll just go about 1/4 of an inch one more time all the way around this onion, cutting along the line. There we go. And then from there, you can kind of see I've got lines going horizontally and vertically along this onion, but it's still staying together in one piece, which makes it really nice and easy for me to slice properly. From there, I'll line up my onion just like this. I'll do a little bit of a claw to protect my fingers from getting snagged here. And I'll start to small dice the onion. And what you come out with when you do it this way, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but each of these pieces of onion are all the same uniform size. We don't have a bunch of chunks that are big and a bunch of chunks that are small. As I dice this onion, they're all going to come out one uniform size and length. And I'll go ahead and continue to small dice this onion all the way across. From there, we can take that little bit of butt that's left over and set it down. And because it's got this natural curvature to it, I'll just go ahead and I'll slice it right along that line. And it's going to provide me with, once again, the same shape as the rest of my onion was just cut in there. You'll notice as I do a lot of this cooking, I like to clean up frequently. I like to work in a clean kitchen and stay organized as we go. You'll hear me say it 1,000 times over, a clean kitchen produces clean food, and that's exactly what we're going for here. I've got my handy dandy little bench scraper, kind of a third hand for us chefs. I'll scoop up these onions and I'll place them in a little container here that we'll use for our spinach a little bit down the road. And you'll notice as I scoop these up, my eyes are dry. I don't have any tears. I'm not crying from slicing that onion. And part of that is the technique that we just used to slice it in. We're not damaging the onion as we slice it. And the other half is that I used a very sharp knife for that. And both of those are going to be very beneficial for keeping our onion nice and flavorful and keeping our eyes dry in the process, which is exactly what we want. From there, we can go ahead and I'll wipe down my cutting board a little bit to make sure there's no chunks of onion on here. And we'll go ahead and grab our salmon loin and we'll move on to fabricating your salmon loin. Now you can see on this beautiful cut of fish, I left it, like I said, skin on, and it's already been descaled, and so we won't have to worry about that. I'll set this down and I'll take my chef knife, and I'm going to go ahead and separate that belly section that we talked about from the main loin. That's going to provide us with a really nice salmon portion and salmon fillet so that it cooks evenly and it's nicely sized. So I can kind of see where the fat on this stops and it turns into a different angle, and that's exactly where I want to slice this along. There we are. And I'll set this aside. Do not throw this away. This is one of the best parts of the entire salmon. You can see the marbleization on that delicious fat there. And you can still cook this the exact same way that we're going to cook the rest of it, but it requires far less time. I like to cook this almost a medium rare so that I don't take all those essential oils and fatty acids in there and disintegrate them with high heat. Okay. From this point, we've got our nice salmon, the main loin there. You can see it's still very nice and marbleized with the fat. That's what we want. That's where all those really healthy essential oils are. And I'll go ahead and portion these into the salmon-sized fillets that we're going to eat for today's meal. Now this looks to me like enough for about 3 fillets, depending on how hungry you are. Of course, if you're really hungry or you eat a much more larger portion, you can feel free to cut it thicker or thinner as you desire it for you and your family. There we go. I'll go ahead and flip this over and we'll start to address the skin. Now, part of the reason that I leave the skin on is not only because I think it's delicious, but also because that's where a large portion of the fat hangs out as well, and those essential oils that we have in there. Now, in order to make this nice and crispy, because when we saute this up, if we don't do it correctly, it'll end up a little bit soggy and chewy. It's not very appealing to eat, or to look at for that matter. So in order to maintain this and make sure it comes out really crispy, almost like a nice crispy chicken skin or something like that, we want to remove as much of the moisture from this skin as possible. Now I can already kind of feel that it's not very moist, which is good. So I'll grab just a regular paper towel, and I'll kind of pat dry that skin to get any of the remaining moisture off of the top of there. And I'm gonna put light pressure. I'm not gonna do anything too crazy. And then kind of the trick of the trade, what they call this is squeegeeing the fish. So if you're in a restaurant and you hear one of the other chefs say, hey, squeegee down the salmon, and you kind of look at them in a weird way, what they mean by that is they're gonna take their chef knife just like this, and they're gonna try and coerce the top of the salmon skin to remove a little bit of that moisture. And I'll show you exactly what we mean here. I'm not gonna put heavy pressure, but I'm gonna put enough where I can draw out a bit of that moisture. This will also help to remove any of the scales. And you can already see on the tip of my knife there, I've removed a couple of scales, as well as moisture that was trapped in that skin. And I'll do that a couple more times, keeping a fairly sharp angle on my knife. I don't wanna cut into the skin, but I wanna get enough of depth on there to remove all of that moisture. That way we get left with nice dry skin that will come out nice and crispy. And again, I'm just kind of taking my angle and I'm just scraping the skin just like that. And with each pass that I do, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm getting little bits of moisture removed from that skin, and that's what's gonna guarantee us nice and crispy skin every single time. So I'll scrape these two off really quickly, or squeegee them as we say, to remove all of that moisture. Again, I'm gonna clean my knife constantly as we go. We wanna make sure we're keeping these nice and clean. There we go. And I feel pretty good about that. Not a lot of moisture content. I can see that the dullness of that beautiful skin is starting to fade down as we remove some of that glossy moisture there. And at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and season this salmon, and we'll get it ready for sauteing a little bit down the road. And to season this today, what I'm gonna do is just a simple kosher salt and pepper. I'll flip this back onto the skin side. Again, cleaning as I'm going, keeping my station nice and clean. I'm gonna take a little bit of that kosher salt and generously coat the salmon with it. I don't want to do too much because again, we want to stay low sodium, but I want enough to really treat the fish with respect and get a nice flavor out of it. I'll also do a little bit of cracked pepper. Now I'm not going to put any salt or pepper on the skin side because I don't want that to draw out the moisture in it and cause that to be difficult to kind of crisp up at the end. I'll then set this salmon aside for a second and we'll start to get our saute pan ready to go. Now I'll come over here, and one of the cool things about this dish is that we can do almost all the cooking in one single pan, which is awesome. It saves dishes. No one likes to do dishes. I especially do not. So we're gonna try and do as much of the cooking as we can in this one dish. I'll go ahead and get this started, and I'll put this on a medium-high heat. Now when I say medium-high heat, imagine if there was a 1 to 10 scale on your stovetop burner. I'm at about a 7 out of 10 right now, 10 being the hottest that it goes. And I'm gonna kind of let this pan preheat. I don't want it to be a smoke point. And by smoke point, I mean when I add the oil, you get a little wisp of smoke that whips up the top. I don't quite want that, but I want it to be hot enough so that my salmon skin does not stick, and also that it crisps up thoroughly. So while this is preheating, I'll get the rest of my ingredients ready to go, and I'll clean off my cutting board, and then we'll be ready to start with the saute process. Okay, so we've got our saute pan preheated to a medium-high heat. I can feel that the pan's nice and toasty, but it shouldn't be enough to cause the smoke point on this extra virgin olive oil. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little less than a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil into that pan. And again, I'm on about a 7 out of 10 on the heat scale here. I'll make sure that the extra virgin olive oil coats the pan nicely here. And what I'm looking for in the pan is your olive oil, if your pan is preheated properly, will kind of dance a little bit. You'll see a little bit of a shimmer on the top of your stove. And that's exactly what I'm seeing right here, which lets me know that that oil is nice and hot and it's ready to start cooking. So at this point, I'll come over and I'll grab my salmon loins here. And I'm only gonna cook 2 of them at a time. I'll cook the rest a little bit later on. And don't be scared of this pan. You know, I don't want you to feel anxious about the heat. It's going to take a little bit of splatter. It's going to kind of do a little violent bubble. Don't be scared of that. That just means that we're cooking at the right temperature. So I'll go ahead and grab my salmon loin, and I want to lay this skin side down. And you'll hear that little bit of sizzle. That's exactly what you want to hear. If you don't hear that sizzle, it means your pan was not quite hot enough yet. And I'll give those a light press so that the skin is evenly pressed down all the way across. Not enough to damage the salmon, but just so that I make sure it's nice and even. And I'm gonna lower my heat to a medium heat. That's about a 5 out of 10 on the heat scale. And we're gonna cook these salmon about 80% of the way on one side, meaning I'm gonna leave this on the skin side until I see that the rest of the salmon is becoming more opaque. And the reason for that is it's gonna help us to get that crispy skin and also to maintain the salmon's temperature so that we don't overcook it and it becomes dry. All right, so we've got this salmon cooking. I'd say it's pretty good now. It's been cooking for about 4 or 5 minutes on the skin side down. It's got a really nice crispiness going on to it. I'm gonna go ahead and flip this salmon over and just let it kiss on that other side for just a few minutes to finish up. I like my salmon to be a little bit more medium, meaning I want the center of it to be slightly undercooked. There we go. Slide that salmon over just a little bit. And I can already tell just by looking at it that skin is nice and golden and crispy, and it's gonna be easy to eat and delicious at the same time. And I'm only gonna let this salmon sit on this side for about 2 minutes or so. One of the telltale signs of salmon being cooked through is you'll notice on the sides of the salmon, little pieces of fat will start to kind of ooze out the side. You'll notice that it becomes more opaque and more white as it cooks, and that's exactly what we're going for. From here, we're gonna let our salmon rest. Now, resting your salmon is really important. People talk about resting meats a lot, but they don't talk about resting seafood. In my opinion, any protein that you're cooking, especially over high heat, can really benefit from sitting for a few minutes and just resting to let all of those natural juices reincorporate into the meal. One of the things you might see me using is this fancy little spatula. This is a fish spatula. It's really helpful for fish because it's slightly flexible. It's very thin, which allows you to kind of tuck under the meat a little easier. And it's got those grooves so that the fish doesn't stick to the spatula at the same time. Now I'd say we've had this flipped for about a minute or so. I'm gonna give it a quick check to see how it looks on the other side. Nice, and I've got a nice little golden brown going on. I'd say these salmons are cooked just how I like them. I'm gonna go ahead and remove them and start the resting process. Now to do that, I've just got a regular old plate with a paper towel on it. That'll absorb up any of the extra oils that are on there and allow me to continue cooking. There we are. And I'll set these aside. And one thing that I want to show you, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it on my mic, but this skin is nice and crispy and crackly all the way through, which is exactly what we're going for. I'll set these aside to rest. And at this point, we're gonna leave our pan with the oil in it. I'm not gonna turn off the heat. I'm gonna leave it just like this. And we're gonna start sauteing our spinach. So I've got our diced onion that we prepared a little bit earlier. I'm gonna go ahead and toss this in. I don't need a lot. I probably won't use that whole half an onion. I'll leave it about right there. Give this a nice toss. And we're gonna cook that onion for about 2-3 minutes, just until it starts to turn translucent and soft. I'm not gonna add any salt and pepper to this. Again, not quite yet. I will in just a moment. Now, while these are sauteing, they're gonna take, like I said, about 2-3 minutes to saute up just right. I'm gonna go ahead and get my spinach ready that we're gonna toss directly on top of this. Now, I've got my bowl of spinach right here. And I've got my zester. Now this is also called a microplane, but a zester is the most common. I've got just a regular everyday lemon that I've washed a little bit earlier today. And I'm gonna zest a little bit of this lemon directly into my bowl of spinach that we're going to saute. This adds a really nice kind of acidity and zestiness to it. I use the zest instead of just the juice by itself because the juice, the acidity in it will turn the spinach leaves a little bit more darker green, more of an army green, which will probably happen anyway, but at this point it'll slow the process and the zest will carry the flavor through all the way. Now I don't want to zest this too deeply, meaning I just want to go to the pith of the lemon until it's a little bit more white. Just the outside yellow part is what we want to incorporate in there. There we go. Oh, and it smells amazing already. Now go ahead and bring my spinach back over here so that it's ready to go. I'll toss my onions one more time. There we are. I'm gonna turn up the heat just a little bit here. So right now I'm at probably an 8 out of 10 on the heat scale. I want these onions to be nice and hot and translucent before we add our spinach in. Once our spinach goes in, it's all gonna kind of come together very quickly. I've also got to the side here a little dollop of butter. Butter is really going to add a nice creaminess to this meal. It's going to help to break down that spinach as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add probably a teaspoon of that salted butter, not too much, but I want it to add a nice flavor to it. And before that even melts all the way through, I'm going to go ahead and toss in my spinach here. Now this looks like a lot, but because spinach has such a high moisture content, this is really gonna break down pretty heavily and it's gonna saute down into the perfect portion size for 1 or 2 people. All right, so we've got our onions and our spinach all in here. We've got the lemon zest in there. We're just gonna give this a light toss just to coat those onions and that spinach. We're not gonna cook this for very long. We just wanna cook it enough to wilt that spinach a little bit. And that butter is going to really help with that process. From there, I can kind of ditch these tongs and I'll start to just manually toss the pan. And you can really see a lot of those spinach leaves kind of coming together and clumping together. Sometimes it can be difficult to season the spinach properly because it causes that clump. That's why you saw that I did the lemon zest before I added it to the pot. That way the lemon zest is evenly incorporated throughout the rest of the spinach. And I can see that these are wilting up nicely. I don't want to cook them until they're mush. I don't mind them being just a little bit al dente, if you will. And I'd say that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and take another plate, line with a paper towel, and I'm going to drain these off. Now you don't have to drain these are optional to drain, but this will prevent there from being a small pool of water at the bottom of the plate. If you don't mind that pool of water, you can totally skip this step. There we go. From here, I'm just going to go ahead and set this spinach aside and we're almost ready to start plating our meal. Let's go ahead and check on our parsnips and see how those guys are doing in the oven here. Beautiful. So as you can see, they've got a really nice golden brown color to them. They're soft all the way through. I'll give them a pinch to double check, and they're soft to the touch, which is exactly what we want. And you can see that they've got that nice caramelization on the outside. That's exactly what we're going for. I'm gonna go ahead and set those right there for now. I'll loosen them up so that there's none stuck to the pan, which they're not. That extra virgin olive oil that we coated them with helped to prevent that. And we're gonna go ahead and start plating up our meal here. All right, so we've got all of our ingredients all cooked up, ready to go. The only thing left to do is to plate it and make it look nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my tongs here, grab our spinach that we've sauteed up with those onions and that lemon zest. I'm gonna make a small pile right in the center of the plate here. Just like that. Set this aside. From there, I'm gonna go ahead and grab our parsnips that we roasted up. Oh, and they look and smell so good too. I love a little bit of roasted parsnip. The sweetness in them comes out. They pair really nicely with the earthiness of the spinach as well. And then the only thing left to do is to place our salmon on top of that spinach, just like that. And then I like to do one last little finish of salt over the top of the skin of the salmon here, just like this. And then the very final ingredient that's optional, but that I think is delicious and adds a really nice flavor compound to it, is I like to do just a small squeeze of the lemon around our ingredients here. So I'm just gonna take this and just do a real light squeeze around the outside of that. It's gonna add a nice acidity to the plate, and I'll clean up our plate to make it look presentable and delicious, of course. Soaking up any of that residual grease or oil that may have trapped itself on the plate. And what we're left with is this beautiful, delicious looking salmon with sauteed spinach and roasted parsnips. And this is low sodium, low fat, tons of omega-3 fatty acids in that salmon. Really, really healthy and delicious, and it goes great for lunch or dinner as well. All right, and this is what we're left with, this beautiful Alaskan salmon with crispy skin, sauteed spinach, and roasted parsnip root. Just beautiful, delicious, and healthy. Again, I'm Chef Rees with Key to the Kitchen Catering Company. Thank you again to Golden Carrot helping to make these classes happen. I hope that your dish turns out as beautiful and delicious as this one does. I wish you all the best and happy cooking. Thank you again.